Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with GetWisdom. Today we're going to continue with our channeling series, and today Karl is going to channel Tim Avicii Bergling. He went by Avicii, that was his stage name, and he was a young, prolific musician, music producer, had a tremendous career, globally famous, tragically ended his life apparently by suicide when he was 28 years old. And so we're kind of in the same category as some of the other artists that we have interviewed where they had short lives, died young, oddly around that same age, around the 27, 28 years old. So Tim is among that group. So I think the big difference here is just that it's a generational thing. He's a much more recent musician. His following was of a younger generation than Karl and I and our generation. So this should be interesting. And Karl, maybe you could kind of set the stage for us a little bit with this type of a subject as a channeling subject for this series.
Sure. Thank you, Danny. Thanks to all of you who are watching this, and I hope this is insightful and of value to you to see what wisdom can be distilled here by our subject for today. And we always look forward to these because we always do learn something. It's really remarkable. And if you look at the landscape, kind of the mosaic of all of these channelings, they kind of tell a story. Bit by bit, they bring a different dimension to the discussion that fills in gaps and really connects the dots. And you really see the tapestry of life in a new way. There's more going on than we realize just looking on the surface of things. There are hidden forces at work, the forces of darkness. Primarily is our focus because we are probing to learn from beings in the light more about this because there aren't reliable places you can go among the living. We're all being duped, we're all being manipulated and kept from knowing things, and we get propaganda, disinformation, people who are mind control manipulated to disregard whole subjects and won't even think about extraterrestrials. It just kind of bounces off and they won't even engage with you. And even with spiritual things, people are being programmed to disregard that whole idea. And this feeds the secular movement and so forth. So in terms of our subject today, I guess I would say he's kind of after my time. You know, I've aged out of exposure to people in his age bracket, in a sense, and that's always the way it is. You know, this is, you know, I'm sure everyone's heard this all their lives. You know, they think their music is the greatest, and they don't understand the old fogies who turn up their nose and so on. And if you followed the prior generations to yours, if you lived long enough to kind of get a more mature perspective on it, you'll see, you know, the music of the 20s and 30s is very much alive on the airwaves and amongst the older set. You go to the nursing homes, the assisted living facilities, and you hear those old, you know, Benny Goodman recordings from those eras, pre-World War II and a little beyond maybe, and so on. You know, I grew up in the rock and roll era when that first came on the scene. I remember clearly the dividing point and seeing the difference and how it horrified the older generation. So this artist, I think, is much more palatable with what he contributed. I think it's of a higher level than a lot of the novel music that comes in with generations past. So I give him a lot of credit for really being in touch with humanity and with some important kinds of wisdom, in terms of the love message and tolerance and the kind of the quandaries of life and being sensitive to difficulty and being disconnected and all those sorts of things in various ways. And it comes through in the lyrics and the integration, of course, musically. And that's what talent is. It's really bringing forth that capability to give you information, but move you and open your heart a bit and touch you. And that's really the divine gift behind music. But anyway, I'll let him speak to what he wants to say about it. But I'm hoping he will reward us similarly with some insights about this all and his story and what it means.
Well, Karl and I were talking earlier about the irony of someone having such huge success, global success, and then ending his life that way at a relatively young age. If he indeed did commit suicide, and I kept thinking, like that, one of the contributing factors to this is that, even despite all this success and money and travel and getting such huge support from his fan base and other musicians, he was sought out by other successful musicians. The feeling I got was that he sensed that there was still something that wasn't quite right, and that may have fed his angst. Was that he wasn't quite able to put his finger on what was still off, given that he had all the trappings of what we would call success. And I'm kind of hoping that he might speak to that here. And my speculation is that, he could have been aware at some level of what we've became aware of here at GetWisdom about, the threat that plagues humanity, and keeps coming up, and it's been like the message since day one, since the first channeling you did with Dwight D. Eisenhower over 2 years ago. There's something afoot here that needs our attention. Maybe he had some sense of that, but was never really able to put his finger on it.
Yeah, well, this is common to performers and artists and those involved with the creative pursuits, that they bump up against what they think of as reality, the hard-driving, cynical business world, and then often find themselves at war with their own managers and with the institutions they have to interact with to get bookings and marketing support and access to venues. And it tells a story, because in spite of the fact they are a lucrative commodity, they meet with resistance right and left. And the stories of this are legion, how they get manipulated and they get exploited. And sometimes they get arbitrarily dropped or excluded from things, kind of for arbitrary reasons. Maybe a kind of cultural prejudice in the case of the people of color and so on. But there's always something, it's just kind of amazing. Back in the days of the ascendance of modern music, popular music, the record companies were quite rapacious and predatory. And they had these artists working for pennies. And they were just, they just had this basic technology. So they were the choke point. I mean, you had to go to them. But they were hardly humanitarian, hardly supportive and uplifting, except as it made them money. And they took the money largely and not the artist, this kind of thing. And a lot of people got discouraged and they gave up. They couldn't make a living, even if they were recording artists and it got out there and got sales and so on. They still had trouble because they were struggling. And so the world is not a level playing field to begin with. And that's really, I think, what we hear again and again.
Yeah.
And there's personal aspects to that are always working as well, because these people become targeted and tormented within. And then all bets are off. You got to have inner freedom to have the ability to cope with the vicissitudes of life and the demands of being a performer and all of that. So I'm looking forward to talking with him and getting some insights.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I don't have anything to add to that, really. You will have seen a bio prior to Karl and I coming on the video here, so that gives some background information about who Tim, or Avicii, who he was and his impact. And maybe with that, we should go ahead and get started.
Okay. I will take a moment to get in the state of consciousness that I need to make the intuitive connection. And I do this through the creator of all that is for two reasons. One, to ensure accuracy, that I reach my target. So I'm not just doing it through my own intuitive reach, but I get divine help, and also protection, to be sure that the conversation is guarded and held safe and can't be interfered with by interlopers. And this is a pitfall in channeling work, sadly, and I've said this many times, that more than 90% of channelers have been corrupted, and they're talking with imposters. They're well-meaning. A lot of them are very spiritual and want to help the world, but they don't think about safety. They think if they reach out to the heavens, what can go wrong? I mean, you're reaching to the heavens and they'll keep it safe and keep you safe. And that's really not true. It's just like anything else we do down here. If you walk out of your house in the middle of the night to go for a walk, you're taking a little more risk in a lot of places than if you do it at midday. And it's your choice. And it doesn't mean that God will keep you safe just because you're a nice person and you don't mean harm to anyone. This is a free-for-all. And it's a free-for-all every place there is between the physical level and the higher astral plane, the heavens, everything in between. And there's a lower plane with spirits whizzing around, and they're dark. And that's a big source of evil in the world. And there are extraterrestrial psychics preying on the channelers. So this all sounds crazy, but I assure you it is true. So the channelers get corrupted to talk about sweetness and light and ascension and only good things happening, and they won't deal with problems. They won't bring it up. If someone does, they deflect it with a kind of feel-good affirmation kind of thing. And it all sounds reassuring, but essentially it's disempowering us. So we sound like the bad guys because we talk about dark things a lot, but there's a reason. It's the fact that darkness does exist. Look at the world. There's a lot of trouble in the world. We didn't make this up. We're reacting to it, and we're trying to understand it. That's our quest. That's our search for knowledge. So I will get started now, and we'll go from there. So thank you for indulging me, but that's my kind of Surgeon General's warning, so to speak. When you connect to a channeler, be careful, because you might be signing on to be followed by the darkness. In fact, this happens as well.
Right.
So, all right.
Okay.
This is Avicii speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Were you able to transition successfully? And was your death indeed at your own hands? And can you tell us about the circumstances that led to your death?
My death was at my own hands in one sense, but caused by others in a larger sense. I failed to make a transition, and this was quite devastating and a horrific experience. People in the living have little idea that they can fall into a trap, ending up in a very dark place, filled with dark beings, with a demonic energy, an evil intention, a desire to prey on the weak and fragile, newly emerging from one kind of existence and not yet adapted to the next. There need not be difficulties at all with transition if people are prepared. When you want to go to heaven, you want to be reunited with your Creator who loves you and with other loving beings you have spent time with through the eons. It is a glorious opportunity. It is a rebirth to much greater enjoyment and quality of life than you will ever have in the physical on the earth. That is a dark place. And there are reasons for it as a learning, as a kind of training in how to navigate the dark shadows, the corruptions, the manipulations, the deviations from divine alignment, the workings of the darkness at its worst. That is the earth, summed up succinctly. When we emerged from our physical body, we were helpless, we were weakened, we were wanting to end it all. That is a guarantee. You will not get to heaven immediately because you are not wanting it, and your free will still governs your fate. The light will make a gesture offering assistance, but if it is not seen because you are such in a dark place, you will be lost, and perhaps for a good long while. You will be in the place of evil. We do not wish to scare people, but it is better to know that fate could happen if you are unprepared, but need not if you simply embrace love and stay in a loving alignment with your life in all ways, and embrace the idea of the divine in your thinking. Make an allowance for this, even if you doubt. It will help build a bridge and can save the day. Those with belief who look forward to leaving behind their earthly cares, usually after a long, full, and rich life, but with growing infirmity, see that time does run out, have the easiest transition because they believe within there will be something better, and indeed they are correct. I was targeted because of my success, what I represented as a magnet for others by bringing in divine communication in the form of music. and the lyrics that I crafted. It's not that I was a perfect beginning. In many ways, being quite an improbable divine prophet. But we can tell you that every artist of any kind is a divine messenger, whether they have an impact, whether they are embraced and followed avidly, praised, rewarded financially, and become a household name, makes no difference. They are all here serving the divine and the cause of love and the rescue of humanity from the darkness. For that is what divine messages are designed and intended to do. And so that is why the artists are targeted by the darkness. The darkness sees their appeal, sees the power they are gaining, and jealously moves to snuff it out. This has happened again and again and again. And often to the young artists who are the shooting stars, the ones on an ascendancy, on their way to greatness in stature. Those who persist and have lengthy careers are few and far between. And they are quite lucky to do so, because they will need to have divine protection in many instances in order to accomplish that, because they too will be targeted along the way. This takes many forms. Manipulations causing them to make a misstep in their career in some way, pursuing a faulty idea, a misunderstanding of what receptivity there might be, and then moving into something too exploratory, experimental, and esoteric to meet much of an appetite, and then lose their following because they are leaving their followers behind. So simply by encouraging novelty and a kind of exploratory approach that in effect becomes reckless, they impair their own future progress, but it accomplishes what the darkness wants to see, a dimming of their light. There are often manipulations to tempt artists with improper, risky, and even reckless sexual liaisons, as with teenagers, for example. This too can cause a career to blow up. It happens so frequently, with the lowering of standards also underway through manipulations by the extraterrestrial alliance. Ironically, such behavior is becoming more and more tolerated, and has happened so much it is almost felt it is to be expected. And why not just overlook it as a part of human life, human weakness, and with the tendency always of human to be forgiving and compassionate, because that is their divinity on display. We'll continue to be understanding and supportive of powerful, important, and well-regarded public figures even with such missteps, they are the fortunate ones to survive the manipulations, although it costs them. It costs them dearly with regard to their own misgivings, their own self-image, and karmically as well, because any wrongdoing on their part will need to be rebalanced. So in a sense, they will be tried and convicted by the law of karma and will serve a sentence of some kind. This is not divine judgment and punishment. It is simply the way energies are governed in your universe. Everything being designed to be in balance, and when it is not, the law of karma will see to it. Even if it takes multiple lifetimes to catch up to you, you will repay your debts to others and to yourself. A major way that productive talent is squelched is to tempt the artists with drugs and alcohol, because there are very pleasurable responses to such self-soothing when there are inner doubts, inner fears, or simply the stress of demands of a busy career and having to answer many competing voices to make negotiations, make arrangements to meet deadlines, do all this required to maintain high standards of performance, the practice time, the creative interludes that must be sought and jealously guarded for doing the interior work to launch a creative enterprise, a new painting, a new sculpture, a new composition, a new beautiful song to inspire others or convey a human emotion, a human drama of some kind, to touch the hearts and minds of others and thereby create a bridge to divine wisdom by recognizing and, in a sense, ennobling that suffering. So others will hear it and realize, I have felt this way too. I too am suffering, but I'm not alone. There are others like me who have lost something they desperately need. And that is kind of a sharing of burdens, even though once removed, that can tie people together energetically. And this creates a kind of network such that when one or more of its members has a love solution come their way, it can spread energetically to the clan. This is how generations are moved by the artists to begin with. It is not so prosaic as being the case. Kids line up at the record stores to get the latest singles, as happened in the 50s. They hung on their radios and wanted their own transistor they could take wherever they went to stay in touch with their favorite disc jockey. And then with the advent of the internet, having many, many sources, and then through the electronics, the downloadable tunes they could carry in mobile devices and so on, share with their friends. All such vehicles, such mediums, create an energetic connection. And that is best seen at the concert gatherings where hundreds to thousands of people will come together to enjoy a favorite artist and share the experience viscerally and demonstrably, being carried away by the emotions of what it brings to them. And part of that moving experience is the sum total of the energies present, focused on those moments. It is quite a different experience than sitting at home listening to something on the radio, although that too connects one to the clan. It is just a transfer of energy in a smaller rate than being more closely embedded in the throng. This connection carries with it a power to persuade, a power to uplift, a power to inspire. That is its danger to the darkness. I was manipulated to indulge in alcohol and some drug use as well. In my circles, it is a frequent occurrence. And this is a danger for the musicians in particular because of the ready availability of such materials. They will be offered to you again and again and again by well-meaning compatriots who themselves indulge. And in fact, in those circles, because of the corruption, take it as an obligation, a point of pride, that they can give a visiting artist collaborating, for example, or brought in for a specific project of their own, but needing the support of other musicians, engineering personnel, and so on in a recording studio, to have an array of goodies available as a token of friendship and a demonstration of their thoroughness and preparation to anticipate the artist's needs. This, of course, varies within differing groups, but has been all too prevalent. It is very hard to avoid sampling such things when one is surrounded by users who swear by the benefits. But that is an art. They give the encouragement when they are still feeling the peak moments, the benefits in releasing them from their cares, and feeling exalted and more powerful, and seeming to gain energy, which is an illusion because it is largely the subtraction of negativity for the time being. So more energy is available for enjoyment. On the downward part of the arc, things will be different. They will be flagging. They will be increasingly lethargic and less effective in all they do. And it is at that point when they might be weeded out. Now mistrusted by compatriots to be reliable, to be an asset to an artistic endeavor, and so forth. And the headliner as well will have a similar trajectory. If indulging too greatly, there will be a point of no return when their artistry declines, and they may have less and less productivity as a consequence. My struggle led to withdrawal from obligations for self-preservation. It was not simply selfish indulgence. It was actually impairment of my capabilities. This was heavily reinforced by a direct manipulation of my mind to give up my pursuits. I was attacked and programmed directly to doubt my talent. And this created a growing burden within in having to face audiences, to put my reputation and my feelings on the line and being vulnerable, even to gather with other artists for a project of some kind. Knowing I will always be judged, this is simply a part of what happens. It's true of every level of engagement. Just attending a party, one knows others will be noticing you and forming opinions and reacting to you. And if you begin to think about the implications, you can create worry within yourself. Will you be favorably received? Will you make a good impression? Will you be liked? Will you be found wanting? Many people inhibit themselves in this way, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it is not imaginary that one can slip, one can make missteps and lose confidence of others. All have experienced this during their life on a small scale, if not a large one. All of these were factors pressing on me and causing me to withdraw, to be more reckless with imbibing, and ultimately to give in to the inner voices calling for my demise. It is a reckless game played by the spirit meddlers who infest most human beings and torment them from within. The strong and resilient may never notice anything amiss. It is as though they can keep them at bay with one hand tied behind their back. But other people who are more sensitive, more vulnerable, have greater vulnerability because they come into their current life on the heels of other lifetimes where they were savaged by such manipulations. When it then again resumes, they are thrown into a panic because they will know the existence of those other lifetimes on a deep inner level. And the new arriving spirit meddler attachments will have a field day, throwing that in their face as a preview of coming attractions to be dreaded, to be feared, and to undermine their host, all of which creates negative emotional energy they can tap to keep them going. They are an energetic parasite, desperately needing a human host to survive, and play this dangerous game of even encouraging them to end their own life. By far, there are many more considerations of suicide and suicidal thoughts than people who carry out the deed effectively. So most of the time, the spirits win in their perspective. tormenting their host to the maximum and gaining personally from the emerging negative emotions. It is no way to live for a human being. And this was a devastating downward spiral for me. And eventually I decided I needed to make it stop. And that was the desperation within, as I felt I could not regain my former perch. And all of that was weighing on me in what seemed to be a wise decision, a wise course of action, to simply bow out and do so in private rather than risk a public humiliation, stumbling and falling short, and then feeling like a failure and undergo the humiliation of public disapproval. This is the risk of stepping onto the stage in the limelight, so to speak, that one can eventually be felt beyond their prime and lose their following. And then we'll see the numbers fade, the crowds dwindle, the applause diminish, and we'll realize it is their failings. All of this was pressing on me and caused me to take the rash acts that I did to end things. It was not because I was weak. It was because I was faced with an opposition that was stronger than I was. This is the piece that is missing when people look at those who commit this rash act. It is an act of deliverance from their perspective. It is as though they are being roasted in a fire and are jumping to safety. They want out, but it is for good reason from their perspective, at least. It is not a selfish act in that sense. It is an act aimed at a kind of survival, an escape from horrific inner torment. Until you have experienced it yourself, it is wise to not judge others undergoing such a horrific time. Everyone is different in what they can tolerate and what they cannot. In my case, there were very deep karmic wounds from other lifetimes as well that made me vulnerable to fall into a downward spiral of this kind. And that too is another liability that won't be seen on the surface, but is very much a factor in things and how people end up in places of despair and anguish, even though on the surface it would seem they have everything to live for. This is a mystery to humanity that can be exposed, and an enlightenment grow from what we are sharing with you here.
Okay, thank you. Is there what is called the curse of genius? If such a thing does exist, is a musical genius in a greater risk category?